Today we're taking what we know about scientific notation and their conversions, and we are going to go ahead and start doing operations with scientific notation, specifically adding and subtracting. So there's a lot of notes up here. This is one way to solve in scientific notation. However, I'm going to write in additional notes that make it a little simpler. Basically, when we're doing scientific notation, okay, the first thing that you're going to do is add and subtract in scientific notation, okay? So the first thing, step one, is going to be take the number and put it into standard form. So we take it out of scientific notation. When you do that, you then perform the operation, okay? So that means you either add or subtract in those numbers. The last thing you do is then you put your answer back into scientific notation, and that's your answer. So there are other ways to solve in scientific notation and everything, but these are the ways and the steps that we're going to use in my class. So you take the number and put it into standard form, you perform the operation, and then you just put your answer back into scientific notation. So we're going to use these steps on our examples next. The first example we have, these two are about adding. So we're finding the sum, not the difference. All right, so we're going to find what 4.6 times 10 to the third is when you add it to 8.72 times 10 to the third. So all I'm going to do is take the numbers out of scientific notation. So 4.6, all right, I'm going to make this a little bigger. Okay, so we have 4.6, and we're going to make it bigger by moving it 3 spots. You guys are very good at doing that. So we have 4,600, okay? Then I'm going to take 8.72, move it 3 spots to make it bigger. So we have 8,720. Okay, when you're adding, you make sure you line up your decimals. Remember, on whole numbers, the decimals at the end. And we're adding. It's very important to look and make sure you're doing the correct operation, because we're going to be subtracting here very soon as well. So when you add, you just add them up. We carry the 1, and we are left with 13,320. Now the last thing we have to do is put the number back into scientific notation. So I know that my decimal is going to be 1.332. The decimal was originally at the very end of this number, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. The number was larger than 10 to begin with, so it's a positive 4, and that is our answer for this problem. That's the exact same thing we're going to do on the next example. We have 8.2 times 10 to the second plus 3.41 times 10 to the negative first power. So we put 8.2, we move it to make it larger by 2, so it is 820. Then we have 3.41, we make it smaller by moving it over once. So when we line up our decimals as so. Okay, when you're adding or subtracting, you always line up your decimals. This is a very simple equation that we're going to be answering. I'm filling in all of my zeros in the place markers, and you just add. Well, here we go. This is going to be a really large decimal, but it's going to be easy to solve. You just add straight down. Now, the last thing we have to do is put it into scientific notation. I want to move our decimal over 2 spots, so it is 8.20341. Now I move it 2, and it was a large number to begin with, so it's a positive 2. And that's your answer. When you're adding and subtracting, guys, you are going to see large decimals like the one that I just did, and that is okay. Now we're going to subtract. It's the same situation. You take the numbers out of scientific notation, subtract, and then put the answer into scientific notation. The biggest thing I notice here is the lack of borrowing. You guys got to remember to borrow. So I'm going to take my numbers out of scientific notation. Now these are negatives, so I move it over -2 to make it smaller. So I have 0.032. On this one, I have 6.6, and I move it 3 times to make it smaller. 1, 2, 3, with 2 zeros. Now again, you line up your decimals. That's the most important part of all of this, to stay organized. And we're going to subtract this time. Now, this is when I'm going to have to start borrowing. Okay, I have 0 minus 6. The answer is not 6. You have to borrow. So I had to make the 2 a 1, I make the 0 a 10, and I subtract. 1 minus 6 cannot happen, so again I borrow. It becomes 11 minus 6, which is 5, and then I bring the rest down. Okay, now we put our answer into scientific notation. I know I'm going to move twice to get 2.54. Now, this is going to be a negative 2 as my answer because it was a small decimal that we had. And that's our answer. The next one we have is exactly the same. We're going to put our numbers into standard form first. So I move it 5 times, okay, to make it smaller. It's a negative 5. Whoops, that's an 8. So I move it 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have all of these zeros. So I have 0.00078. I do the same thing with 4.5. Move it 5 times. So again, I have 4 zeros. The most important part, guys, is to line up your decimals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. And now we subtract. We are left with a bunch of zeros and 3s. All right, so that's our answer in standard form. But now we have to write in scientific notation. It's going to be 3.3, but I have to figure out how many times I moved it, which was 5. It was a small decimal to start, so it was a negative 5. And that's how you add and subtract in scientific notation. What I want you to do on these examples, you're going to add and then subtract. I want you guys to pause the video and then do it yourself. See if you get the right answer. When you unpause, you're going to see my work given to you guys. I'm going to kind of explain it again, but I want you to try it on your own first. Remember to take everything in standard form, add and subtract, then put your answer into scientific notation. Go ahead and pause now. All right, to add the next one, you put this into standard form. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I have 0.00021, and then for this one I would get 0.000974. It's very important to make sure you're seeing your adding. So when I add, I have to carry instead of borrow, and that's my answer in standard form. In scientific notation, this would be my answer. Hopefully you guys got that right. Now for the next one, I have these two numbers. We have to line up our decimals. We're going to subtract. All right, so we're going to have to borrow. Just like so. We have zeros here. Now we have an 8, we have a 2, a 6, and a 4. Okay, remember our decimals are back here. So this becomes 4.628 times 10 to the 5th power. Positive because it's a really big number. How'd you guys do? I hope you did really well. Now you guys are going to try out some practice, but your notes are all done. Good job.